HBCU. And boy, I love it, love it. I love it, love it. I love my HBCU. And man, I hope my team is 1-1. I hope my team is 1-1. Yeah, man. I hope my team is 1-1. I hope my team is 1-1. Yeah. I tune into the HBCU Sports Lab. You see my team run along. It's the long. I'm quiet as a mouse. But it's the one to tap. I'ma do the dance, yeah. Cavil, you know what he be talking about, talking like I'm tall. They know what they be talking about, talking. They can press the analytic data with the hip hop if you know them like I know them. They gon' tell you if your team if they wanna love ya and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson. And you gon' learn today, how your team they play, how they play, boy. You gon' learn today, how you play, how you play, yeah. You represent that swag, that me again, let me say, what's up to Tennessee, stay, tune into the HBCU Sports Lab, with Dr. Cavil, Mike and Charles,
And this is Dr. Cavil with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab as we're bringing it to you and giving you a little different, giving you a little more. Let me make sure I get set up here so y'all can hear me loud and clear as I'm eating on my plate here today. And we're bringing in my co-host as we got them going there. We have Charles Bishop and Mike Washington. How's it going, gentlemen?
How you doing, Dr. Cavil?
Doing pretty good.
How's it going, Doc?
Man, we're setting a little history here around the world. For those that don't know it, we're podcasting. We're streaming live on Facebook. We're on Blue Jeans. We're on 12:30 a.m. KCOH live as we are doing it in all kinds of music and radio facets. So let's get ready to bring it to the people. Hot and heavy. This is Dr. Cavil with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop, presented by none other than THG Agency LLC. Check us out on the website, the Heritage Group, as we bring it to you. That's thgagency.com. Welcome and thanks for joining us inside our studio lecture hall as I got all fancy for you all today. So I hope y'all see what's going on and y'all like it. Let me know what you think. For the only week sports talk radio show that is dedicated to exploring the sporting HBCU diaspora, including the marching sport with unique HBCU cultural identity teams, the bands, coaches, athletic directors, commissioners, provost, presidents, big rivalry matchups, classic games, homecoming events, and much, much more of the HBCU athletic aesthetics. As we emerge our lecture with sports business practices in the competitive sports industry, the show seeks to provide innovative, progressive, and informative dialogue about the week's HBCU sporting events, issues, and ideas from a fan's perspective. We review the Southwestern Athletic Conference, better known as the SWAC, the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference, better known as MEAC of the NCAA Division I, the Southern Intercollegiate Athletic Conference, SIAC, the Central Intercollegiate Athletic Association, the CIAA of the NCAA Division II, Gulf Coast Athletic Conference, GCAC of the NAIA, and independent programs such as Tennessee State of the OVC, Hampton of the Big South, and I guess soon to be North Carolina A&T. Man, I'm still not feeling that yet. Langston of the Sooner Athletic Conference, and Texas College as affiliate member of the Sooner Athletic Conference, as well as Edward Waters as they transition from NAIA to NCAA Division II and membership in the SIAC. That should be interesting as we continue to see them move forward and grow and see what they got going on in terms of the HBCU landscape. But with that, gentlemen, as we get started, I wanted to make sure we give a shout out to Ralph Cooper, the legend, as he's getting it done. Tyrone with the Soapbox Hero, as he is a huge component of making sure that we got this together. But that team of producers on the other side, we call them the super producers, and you see why as they make it happen as we getting it done. So stay tuned for all those on KCOH 1230 AM. Stay tuned as you can catch none other than the Soapbox Hero as Tyrone hosts that, and continue to listen to 1230 AM weekly as you have a group of outstanding radio hosts that bring it to you all day long. Make sure you keep up with them, including, again, Ralph Cooper with Sports Lab, as he does it, and other training individuals like myself. So with that, long overdue, Mike and Charles, how's it going? Starting with you, Charles. How's it going today, man?
Hey, well, it's going. Continuing to do this social distancing and catching up on episodes of the Waltons.
None other than Charles will be doing you in terms of the Waltons. Charles, Mike, what about yourself, man?
Oh, just groovy, man. Just growing my COVID-19 beard, catching up on episodes of All American and whatever else is on Netflix. So all is well here.
Man, I see Mike with your background. I see you. For those out there listening, let me give you a visual component of what you would see if you saw us in our establishments in regards to the background with our head as we streaming again. Them on Blue Jeans, us in regards to Facebook Live, and me, I should say. Mike has in his background, he has his paddle, A5A. He has two of them up there, so you know he was one of those super hazers out there. Those days are gone, Mike. You can't do that no more.
Alpha Phi Alpha is a non-hazing organization.
I see you got your COVID-19 beard and mustache going. It looks good. It's coming in real clean.
Oh, yeah.
With your Prairie View golf cap on. Then you got your Prairie View flag in the background. Then you got a Emmitt Smith jersey hanging up. Man, that's kind of nice. I must say.
Signed and authentic.
Oh, wow. You had to add that sign part, man.
That's
don't
right.
forget, I know where you live. I come by there and get you.
Oh yeah, you were notorious for.
Hey man, hold on. He has his cowboy helmet, cowboy stars, the number one foam finger on the wall for those that want to know what he's doing. And then let me go to Charles. Charles is set up. He has a nice flat screen on the TV. It looks like he has a little bit of his workstations on there. No, I'm sorry, that's ESPN Classics or something there. Then he has this nice old school Jackson State University helmet in the background. That's nice. You doing it kind of big there too, Charles. And I'm surprised he can sneak in a little alpha stuff in there. Go ahead.
I said, yeah, signed and authenticated helmet.
So these people with these signed and authenticated, I feel bad now. Well, no, I don't. I have my MEAC SWAC Championship football that is covered on our new table for when we do our remotes. That has our logo. It's in gold with black. I have my Hall of Fame helmet sitting here from the Black College Football Hall of Fame that has authenticated signatures as well. Such signatures, let me put this up for y'all so y'all know. Billy Joe, because I don't want to miss some of these names on here, as you know how we get. Kenny Burrow, Kenny Houston, Eric Harvey that just went in, Ed Too Tall Jones. Yes, sir. Eric Williams went into the Hall of Fame in terms of the Black College this year. Everson Walls. Some of the names I see here. Harold Carmichael. Do I need to give y'all more? Hollywood Henderson. Wow, this is just Shaq Harris.
That's pretty cool.
Yes, I just wanted to make sure y'all knew what was going on. A lot of history as we bring it to you for the benefits of all those out there. With that, Charles, let's get into some hot topics. Let's get into the news of the day. You got any news of the day that you wanted to start us off with before we go to Mike? Let's start with Charles.
Well, I had to dig for it, but coming from our friends from HBCU Game Day, CIAA Rookie of the Year to transfer out. So Johnson C. Smith will have somebody new in their backfield. Last year's their leading rusher last year, Emmanuel Wilson, the reigning CIAA Offensive Rookie of the Year, announced via Twitter that he will not be coming back to play for Johnson C. Smith. Of course, Wilson this past season he rushed for 1,040 yards and 13 touchdowns as a rookie with Johnson C. Smith. So both good for third in the conference, and he had some big games this past season. He had a 265-yard game against Benedict on runs of 83, 73, and 64 yards for Johnson C. Smith. He also had a big game against Fayetteville State in which he rushed for 195 yards and 3 touchdowns. So that's going to be huge for Johnson C. Smith going forward.
That's real big deal, as you said. That's significant in terms of those transfers. It'll be interesting to see if that becomes a trend or is that just one thing. Mike, you got any hot news on the day that you want to get in there?
Absolutely. Like Charles, I had to widen my search and widen my look, but Delaware State University has joined the growing trend of adding women's triathlon to its list of intercollegiate sports. Women's triathlon will become the university's 19th sport and the 13th for women's program, and it will begin its first season in the 2021-2022 season. The university will become the first MEAC conference and second historically black college university to sponsor the women's triathlon. Back in the old day, I used to do the triathlon, but that's neither here nor there.
Man, you doing too much.
The women's, this is courtesy of our friends at HBCU Sports. The women's triathlon is an emerging NCAA sport. Delaware State has a successful history of launching emerging women's programs. We should add, according to DSU Director of Athletics, Dr. D. Scott Hines. Giant stated women's triathlon is comprised of 3 lifetime sports. We have an ideal climate and location. We're surrounded by the ideal training and facilities. So a lot of excitement with the addition of that program.
That's crazy. Trying to set us up for a watch party as we get in here. So, man, I'm getting all kinds of nice things going on here, buddy.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
That's what we going to do. That's how we say, let's get the party started. So,
okay, ask me if I got some more news. Ask me if I got some more news.
I will.
Ask me.
Since you so excited, Mike, what else news you got? And then we'll go back to you, Charles.
Sorry, Charles. I had to break this one. As of Wednesday or Thursday, the Prairie View A&M adds a pair of new additions to the football coaching staff.
Oh, yeah.
Prairie View A&M football has completed its coaching staff with a pair of new hires. Joining the staff are Damon Nivens and Vance Singletary. Nivens has been announced as the Panthers' new offensive line coach, while Singletary has been named assistant head coach of defensive ends and special teams. Singletary brings nearly 3 decades of championship-winning coaching experience to the Hill, most recently coming from Tennessee State. Prior to that, Singletary coached the Memphis Express in the Alliance of American Football League following a 7-year stop at Liberty University. So a plethora of experience. And of course, Vance brings a wealth of experience, and he's coached at every level of the game. So Coach Dooley who's excited with the young guys we have coming in, as well as some of our returnees. He's going to help with their skills and bring a lot of things to the table. So a lot of excitement coming from the Hill, a.k.a. the Prairie View A&M University.
Oh my goodness! Let you just call it. You just the boy just showed out there. Before I jump in there and go back to you, let me see if I can give some love to our folks that has joined us on Facebook Live. On one side of it, we have multiple angles, multiple shots. I have one Facebook Live on my page, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, that gives you a blue jean picture of all of you all, so people can see your background in terms of this on Facebook Live. Then I have our traditional Inside the HBCU Sports Lab that has a picture with our group, a lot of people that has joined us on that side. You have Jimmy Wilson says, let's go. Lonnie Wilson says, listen, Doc, Aggies do. Yeah, Aggies do. You still got love for them Aggies. I just ain't excited about your administration. We'll talk about that later. We'll have plenty of whole show where we'll break that again. But Lonnie Shaw, you my man. And Aggies are good. What's happening, Dr. Ben? They talking about the Big Ben here. There you go. Big Ben, Big Doug checking in. Go PV Nation. Black College 9 said, what's up? Got to give much love to Black College 9s as they continue to get some great stuff in. We had the show last week, so go check it out where we talked about the breakdown for the top 10 in small division, large division they call it. That's our mid-major and major division. And also go check out the plays, blackcollege9s.com, as they had their players of the year. They went ahead and did that, which was a nice platform to make sure players got some love that didn't get to complete the season. So they got a couple of weeks in there. Got Chuck Hunt coming in from Monroe, Louisiana, giving us some love. Jimmy is on here talking about Charles. Mike, what's good? Giving you some love. Always good to hear Jimmy coming in there as he checks us out. We go back and forth, man. He'll keep you on your toes, make sure you're doing all your research, and he wants to know answers. So if y'all want to, give me a shout out on the instant messenger, and we'll give you some questions. Some of them we'll even put on the page. Some of them you can do right here on Facebook Live. We'll get them out on the show today. And so Jimmy said, nice studio setup. Chuck Hunt is laughing on that comment talking about the Waltons. Good night, Johnny boy. Lonnie Shaw says DSU becoming predominantly, yeah, that's predominantly white for y'all don't know. I call it, in this case, predominantly white is probably the appropriate word because you know the universities I call historically white colleges and universities. Willie Mack has jumped on here and checked us out. Carlos Brown, in terms of the Carlos Brown show every Saturday, 10 to 12, as it's produced by none other than Dr. Prince getting it done. Carlos Brown, long time in the business, gave us a chance to show what we have on our side and put us on. So I appreciate Carlos always getting it. I even had a chance to produce him for a short time there before things kept growing and we just got so big that he needed a bigger producer than what they do over there in the Open Mic Network, I'll say. Cool Drew, shout out from the BCSN Sports Ride crew. They're getting a lot of love out there. BCSN, you got to know AD as he brings it on the Byron and AD show. BCSN, they give you sports news, as they call it, the sports rap. WRAP on that side. Check them out. And we're going to get into some of that Final Four as we talk to it now. Let me go to Charles back for some updated news before we get into some major content as we go down the second half of the show. Charles, any other news that you want to bring to the forefront?
Well, yeah, one other thing, and this is on a sad note, former South Carolina State football standout Samuel Hurt Goodwin, he passes, and that comes to us from South Carolina State Athletics. He was a former two-sport star at South Carolina State. He earned all-conference honors in both sports and was a Pittsburgh Courier All-American in football as a senior. So I definitely want to extend condolences to the South Carolina State family. Yeah,
no doubt. I appreciate you getting that out there. We got to give love for this individual. She's always supporting us in different ways. I owe her a big stake. She's on the front lines, and we want to celebrate her and say thank you. Wendy Jenkins Bishop, the brother half, is getting it done. She showed up on here to always support us. I'm surprised that I got to say this. I'm surprised as Charles has this ESPN. I'm surprised he doesn't have one of those big-time victories of Jackson State University beating up on Southern, as he would like to say it.
All I have to do is put it on YouTube.
That's why I figured that you had that. I mean, you would have that going on in the background. I'm surprised. Carlos won't say that. Well, that ain't been in a while, but you can run it. But you can always tell. You can always tell Carlos, don't say too much. You'll go down there and talk to some of his brave friends that keep showing up and showing out on it.
Yeah, they will. Yeah, they will.
We'll get back to some of the Facebook Live folks chiming in, but with that, finally, let's get into some of the dialogue and the discussion that we wanted to talk about on the show today. We got into a final matchup. The Final Four, as we broke it down last week, the Final Four matchups with the final game voted on today, but before coming in today, the Final Four matchup featured Louisiana versus Texas. Who would have thunk it in regards to the basketball, as people think of the South, pretty much, particularly, I should say, the Deep South and the Southwest regions as football territory, football country, if you would. Well, we got a little basketball being played down there, and it showed out, at least in terms of the fantasy world, with the Black College Sports Network, BCSN, as they did the 2020 men's bracket, and they're actually doing it for the women's as well. But we're down to the Final Four, and the Final Four matchups were Southern versus Xavier out of Louisiana, and then you had an old SWAC matchup with Texas Southern and Prairie View. And as Mike would like to show out and said, Prairie View did what they're supposed to do, at least in terms of the fan vote, and they showed up and showed out as they will be a final contender in the championship game. But we have a major upset. This brings us back to the years when we had some of those major upsets going into the final. Was Butler, I guess you would say, where they faced up against Duke, if you want to get into some of those HWCUs in terms of the tournament. This time it's in regards to Xavier, Prairie View and Xavier. Xavier defeated Southern in the fans' vote, and Prairie View defeated Southern in the fans' vote. If you can recall, do you remember your Final Four matchups of what you picked and thought the matchups would be, Charles? What were your Final Four teams?
I think my Final Four teams, if I'm not mistaken, were I did have Prairie View making it to the Final Four, Texas Southern, but I had Southern taking out Xavier. And knowing me, thinking about basketball, I know I would have had at least one or two East Coast teams over there. So I would have had North Carolina Central in the Final Four, no doubt about it, and probably at least a team from the CIAA. When I saw that final matchup, it kind of raised my eyebrows.
It should have, but hey, that's why we call it fantasy. Should have got your people out there and voted. One thing I will say that Xavier needs credit for, and what we have continued to ask our HBCU programs to do, is make sure that they do their part from their athletic department and shine on your athletic department. Now, for a lot of folks, this may have been trivial, but in this type of market, in this time, you want to find out whatever you can to get your program athletics department out in front. And so you really would like to see your sports information people take advantage of it. Xavier did that. They activated their fan base. Now think about how that goes into next year once you come back and you're asking for season ticket sales. You've already engaged this base of fans that are looking something to get into. So even though in some people's eyes this may be trivial, it is fantasy, but you do what you need to do to activate your fan base. And kudos to Xavier for getting on this up front. And Prairie View got involved with their athletic department late, and you see what it did. Now you have people talking about your programs on all these different platforms, and while it's fantasy, they're going to come up and talk about some of the things that Lawrence D. White came up. 2 PV basketball players made NABC 22 All-District team. Gerald Andrews, first team, and Devontae Patterson, second team. So you continue to put that out there. You talk about the recruiting base that Prairie View continues to grow as they're recruiting and looking really good in the recruiting grounds, as well as some of the HBCU programs, but they didn't do the job, so we're not talking about them. We're talking about Prairie View and Xavier in terms of what they got going on. So, Mike, as I move over and ask you, what were your Final Four teams, and what are your thoughts and the importance of taking advantage of a time like this to brand your program continually?
Well, I was taken aback, like Charles, with the final two, but if I go back, my Final Four were Prairie View, Xavier, Southern. I think I had North Carolina Central getting upset. That was the one upset I had. I can't recall who I had. I'm sorry. My notes are a little scribbly from last week, but I actually had Prairie View and Southern actually in the final.
All right.
With a Prairie View victory, but kudos, as you mentioned, to the Xavier fan base. They got out, they did it, and this does galvanize them for next year. You can't negate what they've done. They have 2 players in the All GCAC first team, and forward Williams Lloyd and junior guard Rayshawn Mart. So you can't deny what they've done successfully this season. So while I'm a little surprised, I do understand it, if that makes a lot of sense. So
jump in there, please.
You really hit on something in terms of during this unprecedented times. Well, in terms of what the athletic department is doing from a social media standpoint to continue to for people to talk about your program. And like I said, you saw Prairie View, the fan base get engaged. Xavier's fan base got engaged. And I've been particularly impressed by a few schools in terms of they're not taking this downtime, if you will, laying down. They're putting videos out, they're putting statistics out, they're doing various challenges and things of that nature. But it keeps your school out there in the public eye, and you're very appreciative of that during times like this.
No doubt about it. Great point as you make. And I think when you do it like that, it's important to understand what that means for your program. So, again, credit to the Prairie View folks for getting on. Credit to the Xavier people in their departments of athletics in regards to seeing this as an opportunity to continue to brand their programs. So I thought that was fascinating when you think about those points there. Chuck Hunt chimes in and says Xavier has a competitive basketball program down in New Orleans. No doubt about it. They won the Gulf Coast Athletic Conference this year, both the regular season as well as the tournament. Nipped out of that tournament, and some people thought they could have made some noise in the NAIA tournament as they would won the automatic bid, but you would imagine they would have got a pretty good seeding as they were a top 25 team. So that was one of the things we never will quite know, but it's important again to continue to do that. So for you all out there, continue to make sure you tell your programs to find a way to get the message out. We had this with FAMU. They did it a little more on the entertainment side, as they had a DJ Friday weekend where they engaged their alumni base, and they were trying to figure out what was the announcement. Some of them were talking about they coming to the swag and all this crazy stuff. And he knew from the beginning it wasn't going to be anything major, but he galvanized that group and engaged them, and now he has them, and he set it up even in his way where he had folks provide information where they can continually to contact those folks and give them a great amount of information going forward. So I thought that was amazing in a lot of ways and really intelligent in regards to what they're doing there. So I wanted to get a shout out. So before we close out on this, Mike, who do you have, Prairie View, Xavier?
I got to go with Prairie View. I've gone with them all the way. Their backcourt, plus their combination of scoring, their tenacious defense. I got to go with them. Even though Xavier, first time winning since 1996, they do have a strong presence on the defensive boards. I got to give the edge in tenacity and overall strength to Prairie View A&M.
Charles, who do you have, Xavier or Prairie View?
Hey, Doc, I thought you provided some very interesting statistics in terms of Xavier's matchups with a fellow SWAC foe in playing Southern, and that kind of surprised me. So it kind of made me pause in terms of, would it just, in my head I'm thinking of this complete blowout, no doubt about it, with Prairie View versus Xavier. But it kind of made me pause. I'm still going to go Prairie View because I think the combination of Gerard Andrews and Devontae Patterson is just a little bit too much to overcome. But you got to put that information out there in terms of the way Southern has played. Xavier has played Southern.
Yeah, certainly. When you put that information out there, Xavier, going back a decade, if you would, last time they match up, it was an exhibition game, but just this is fantasy, and so that wasn't one that counted towards the overall record, but certainly was out there for people to take in the information. Southern won the game, obviously, but it was just a 2-point victory by Southern as they beat them in overtime in that matchup, just to let you know that some of these NIA and NCAA Division II teams have some talent. Now, I think over a season time is different when you talk about matchups and the depth you have and the height is a little different. But in this, I will say this. In terms of my Final Four picks, I was 75%. I had 3 of the 4 teams. I had Prairie View, Texas Southern, a 1 versus 2 matchup. And in my other bracket, I had 2 number 1 teams fighting it out. I had North Carolina Central coming out of the bracket there against Southern in the championship game. And I had Central beating Southern to make it. So I had a Central Prairie View final matchup. Obviously, Xavier has found a way to get it done, and they've upset Central to make it to the Final Four in that Elite 8 matchup. Now they've upset Xavier, so it'll be interesting. I think one more time, I think the Panther Nation is engaged now, and I think they're going to show up while you do have the Xavier Gold Rush engaged. I think it's going to be fun. But in terms of a typical matchup, even though it's fantasy, I think the same thing you're going to find out. The bigger branded schools with their engagement that they're involved now, that they're going to find a way to get the championship as they would do on the hardwood. The defensive side with Coach Smith as he wants to win in everything, tennis and marbles. He's going to win in this. And he would coach up his team, I think, defensively to get it done. And then we talk about the fact that Prairie View has those type of individuals getting it done, all conference players. Now you're talking about what they were able to do in NABC 22 all-district team. Gerald Andrews first team, Devontae Patterson second team. Both of them were first team in the SWAC. That talent, I think, is going to be the final difference in them bringing home this fantasy national championship. Who would have thunk it? Also, I think it's nice. Check out DCSN because they gave some love to the women on that side. I think it's interesting. So I implore you, get out and vote. Find a way to brand your programs in any way possible in terms of the women's side. As the interim AD at Prairie View would say in a lot of ways in terms of Alicia Pete, as article just come out giving us some love up there. She'd call it, make sure you should give some love to the girl power in terms of that side of it for the women out there. So give them some love in terms of what's going on, and it should be fascinating in regards to what's going on there. So just wanted to give you some additional love. Let's transition over to this next subject I wanted to get involved in regards to what's taking place in terms of this recent article that came out that dug a little deeper than the first articles that we were talking about last weekend in terms of the NCAA cutting the money for athletics and how it would possibly affect the HBCU programs. Well, this article looked at it from FCS level, and it talked about how FCS programs are used to operating on tight budgets. And it did a tremendous great job, and I'll give you the title and a link so people can go get it after I pass the mic and come back. But I wanted to get your thoughts on this, how the FCS programs are used to not having a lot of money to operate, and while they'll miss the money from the NCAA, when you look at their overall, it's a smaller percentage. The bigger point that people are looking at is in terms of the money they get from their institutions to operate and how that oftentimes comes from enrollment. So until that comes into the picture, right now, HBCUs and FCS programs, if you would, have a chance to operate their programs in such a way that they're used to doing. Let me go to you first, Charles, in regards to what are your thoughts in terms of what this article was talking about?
Well, it highlights the fact that FCS teams are used to thinking in a more strategic manner because you don't have a lot of revenue to play with. So you have to make decisions for the betterment of your program that are normally, some fans will probably scratch their heads in terms of why they do things in the way they do them. But at the same time, you kind of get a very good or very clear picture of where they tighten the belt and why they tighten the belt. So I thought it was a very, very interesting read.
Certainly. Before I go to you, Mike, the title of this article is ADs Say Smaller Schools Better Suited to Weather Coronavirus Fallout. This was written by Emily Caron, C-A-R-O-N, I hope I pronounced that right, of College Athletics yesterday from Front Office Sports. I'll put it on the Inside HBCU Sports Lab for those checking out the show so you can check it out. But one of the things that were highlighted in here, before I go to you, Mike, and then come back to you, Charles, is it says some say we are going to get hit harder because we're working with fewer dollars, and mid-major AD said, but we're used to working with the minimum. Another component that was highlighted in this article said FCF athletic departments also receive support from their institutions, ranging from $2 million to over $46 million, with a median of $13.9 million, as do many mid-majors. Mike, what were your thoughts in terms of the overall framework of this article? Do you agree with it, disagree with it? And then the second part of the question is, how does it affect HBCUs in terms of that conversation?
So the immediate upfront answer is yes, I agree with it, because I look at it from, and I share with you and Charles and a few others, my perspective on the article. It's kind of like corporate America. You have those smaller successful companies that are more not only used to operating in leaner environments or leaner times, but they're more agile, they're more versatile. So it's not about just actually tightening the belt. It's reallocating sources, shifting sources where needed, and then once the market changes, reshifting those sources back. It's reprioritizing and prioritizing, and they seem very better suited to kind of shift those resources. Whether it's, of course, you're going to have enrollment, that's a small part of that, or I'm sorry, a big part of that, but maybe there's another area that may be impacted by the environment. They can shift the resources and continue to stay afloat and really operate successfully. They can use shifting budgets. They can also use, with their budget allocations, they can also they have a lot more decision-making process than what you have with the larger institutions, which have the larger predominantly sports-driven budget that is less flexible, and more rigid than you have with the smaller universities.
No doubt about it. Great point that you make there. Before I transition for a deeper part of this conversation back to you, Mike, and then again to Charles, I wanted to follow up on a interview that HBCU Sports.com did in terms of a podcast provided by Ken Rashad, where he interviewed Dr. Charles McCullin, the commissioner of SWAC, and the article was written in regards to components of that article was by Kendrick Marshall of HBCUSports.com and some other media outlets. He honed in on the part where SWAC commissioner says the COVID-19 pandemic took a lot of money away from JSU Snacks League in regards to that component of that. So with that, because I'm going to let Charles chime in a second, because I know he really kind of brought this to the floor before we heard the commissioner talk about it. In some of our private conversations, he brought that out and even snuck it in the show last week as he finds a way to get JSU's information in there. But credit to him for doing it in a very savvy way. But Mike, with that, what were your thoughts in terms of continuing this dialogue of another example where now the NCAA part of the money, and obviously this would be connected with the SWAC tournament, and possibly if Jackson State went that and obviously made it to the NCAA, that component. And shout out again to Charles in regards to what he's doing with the 1400 Club, because I think they got into a little conversation on this as they were getting excited about the tournament before all this really kicked off and it was canceled. But before I go to Charles to close this part of the segment out, or at least continue with the conversation, Mike, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, with the snacks piece, I think much to the detriment of not only Jackson State but to the SWAC, because he and the university and the SWAC were getting a lot of attention. I think if you listen to that interview and you look at some of the social posts, I think he was slated to make certain appearances, which could have equated, and they could have leveraged that into the more exposure from the SWAC. And they were probably set in a position to actually monetize that aspect in addition to what they would have probably received from the NCAA. So I think that is a detriment. However, I think some of the decisions that Charles alluded to has allowed them to survive. But you wonder, does this hamper, a person like Snack's ability to, to prosper off that, had this COVID-19 not taken place, had it not taken the fold that it is. And, that's unfortunate. Every so often you'll have that with universities where there's a phenomenon, you just can't explain it, and it blows up. It means exposure, not only for the university, but for the conference. And unfortunately here, that's what happened. But that's my takeaway from it,
No doubt about it. With that framing, let me go to you, Charles, now, and kind of wrap this component up for us. And what are your thoughts in terms of the big snacks, what he could have brought to the table and what Jackson State missed out on not even having him at least compete in the SWAC basketball tournament, and who knows, possibly the NCAA tournament?
Make no mistake about it. Thomas Snacks Lee became a viral sensation, And I think what enhanced it even more was the guy has a tremendous personality in terms of being able to handle all the exposure right away and to handle it with tremendous aplomb. And we saw him nationally on the Today Show. We saw him on various media outlets. And he was a very personable person that came across very well on camera. And that is very unfortunate in terms of the COVID happening that really took away exposure not only for him but Jackson State to a greater degree and the SWAC to an even greater degree, because the young man was tremendous in terms of handling himself on interviews and all sorts of social outlets and things of that nature. So, it's just one of those unfortunate things that I think Dr. McClellan, he touched on it in terms of his ability to really bring a greater exposure that the SWAC was just starting to tap into.
Yeah, I think you both make excellent points in terms of looking at that and understanding what that means. I wanted to follow up on a different component of this and go a little deeper dive in what I provided some context to, and we started a little bit about the conversation about FCS, how this will affect HBCUs. I think you'll see a difference in between how it affects HBCU programs between the public programs and the private programs. The private programs tend to be smaller in terms of the enrollment, and therefore it can affect them. Obviously, there's some benefits in terms of the private side. The prestige of your institution oftentimes is connected with private institutions. But we've seen this on the historical white college and university side, where you've seen the private institutions from an academic perspective having their administrators freeze their salaries. Obviously, they have a lot of people that have handsome salaries connected with them participating and being connected with the private institutions and what they bring in branded. Also, they're freezing staffs, salaries, not allowing them to hire people unless they're high need areas, and freezing many things on the academic side except for the faculty. If they were going through the 10-year promotion process, they're continuing to allow that to take place, and obviously they don't get that money in terms of the fall anyway. But with that said, I think you see that connection and how that may affect the difference between public and private HBCUs, because oftentimes we loop all these HBCUs together, and it's good in terms of the overall brand and people focus on it. But when you get into the caveat of really analyzing what does this mean for HBCUs, I think we need to be much more sensitive to that, and I think we are, so that others will, in regards to really understanding what does this look like in terms of that component. Again, you also have the fact that you need to look at it between the NCAA Division I programs and the Division II programs. The enrollment at the Division I programs, just about all of those programs are public. You have two of them that are private, with Hampton and Bethune-Cookman, Hampton University and Bethune-Cookman University. Obviously, you have Howard, which is federally supported, which is much like public, but they have the brand of a private institution, so you can choose how you want to look at them. But the rest of the Division I FCS programs are all public institutions. Some of them varies in terms of enrollments, but that's very different when you look at the enrollment of the Division II programs, which are split evenly between public and private institutions. You have some Division II HBCU programs that are creeping up on that 4,000 or 5,000, which are maybe the smaller side, middle size of some of the FCS HBCU programs. But then you have some of the smaller enrollment Division II programs, and obviously some of the small enrollment NAI programs, which mostly are private institutions, except for Langston, if you would, and obviously SUNO. And we see what the problems they're dealing with academically, which is blend over to athletics, which was before COVID-19. But one thing that I really wanted to get your comments on is the fact that you have, for example, if we were saying that if every student was worth $1,500 for, let's say, athletic fees that goes to athletics, if Then if you consider for every 1,000 students in reduction, you're talking about an institution enrollment for a loss of those 2,000 students that you're talking about $1.5 million that would be missing from an athletic budget for the 2021,000 year based on enrollment. And let me say that one more time so people catch that in case they didn't. I'm saying if you have student athletic fees, essentially you're saying that for each student that you enrolled at an institution, they would be worth $1,500 a piece to the athletic department. So if you just did that over a period of time, one student, that doesn't sound like much. But if you're talking about 1,000 students, you multiply 1,500 times 1,000, now you start to see how significant it is. That is $1.5 million from your budget. So let's say you have an average enrollment of 9,000 students. You take away coming in this fall for some reason, things change, and you dip down to 8,000 students, you've lost $1,005 million. If you're saying that each of those students bring you 1,500. Let's say you dip from 9,000 to 7,000. You double that 1.5 million. Now you're talking about a $3 million hit to your budget. So you can quickly see what this could do in terms of enrollment and how the enrollment in a lot of ways could be more detrimental to an athletic budget, particularly for HBCUs. And I would say that for many of your FCS programs and smaller private institutions as well, as they have large significant chunks of the enrollment that go to athletics, you see what that does. Starting with you, Charles, what are your thoughts in terms of thinking about it in terms of those numbers, moving from just NCAA financial money that's hit to what will happen if you can't find a way to maintain your enrollment for this upcoming fall semester during COVID-19?
Well, my immediate thoughts is that you think about the less branded sports within your program that kind of rely on that money coming into the university and that money being budgeted into your athletic coffers. Your sports, your spring sports, your tennis, your bowling, those sports that you are able to carry, as part of being a Division I program. Are you in danger of losing them?
Yeah, that's a great point. Let me go back in regards to set this up again for you, Mike, in regards to that, give you a little more in terms of that. For those out there that were wondering, when you're talking about budget, that is 3 football money games or 15 money games in basketball. If you do a combination, which is more what you're looking at, that's 1 football money game and 10 basketball money games, equivalent to that $1.5 million, estimating wise, to give you and our listeners a different perspective of how significant the enrollment can be in regards to the athletic budget. So again, Mike, frame your discussions of what your thoughts of what I just unloaded there.
Yeah, Doc, to me, that is significant from the standpoint more so with Division II, NAIA. If you look at them in terms of mid-sized companies, they are typically not built to sustain or absorb a substantial blow like that. So if you take away a significant part of the enrollment, which feeds into a lot of the athletic programs, now, as Charles put it, you're going to have to make some key decisions on which programs you minimize, which programs you cut, if you're not built to at least absorb that through a given specific time. So I don't care if it's 1,000 students. I don't care if it's 900. I think it's more detrimental to the Division II, Division III, NAI programs, some of which may be built to absorb. The other thing, is going to challenge how creative your administration, your organization is if they're not built to absorb such a blow like that through the course of 6 to 9 months. How creative are they to kind of bridge that gap?
Certainly. With that, Charles, as we pretty much ready to close it out, and we'll get into maybe a little more discussion, but we'll close it out and take a break here from the radio side so they can transition over. So we'll play the music, take a break and transition over, and then we'll bring it back and we'll go a little more on this conversation for those that want to continue to follow us on Facebook Live, as well as those that are following us in terms of the streaming views and on Blue Jeans. We'll bring that for a minute, but let me transition, if you would, before I bring you. And as I'm doing that, I do want to get a final thought from each of you in terms of that component, and then I'll ask a different framework. So, Charles, with you, go ahead and give me your thoughts on that. Your final thoughts.
Well, like I said, my final thoughts are there's so many unknowns in terms of looking at those particular numbers. And when I read that information, what jumped out for me, Dr. Cavil, was like I said, the sports that you have that you carry as part of the Division I program for your SWAC and MEAC schools. Are you in danger of losing your less branded sports, your sports that don't necessarily bring in the type of money that your football component, your basketball games bring in? So that was a very sobering look at hearing those numbers.
I want to follow up on that because I think that's a great point you make. Mike, your thoughts?
Yeah, and just to reiterate, there you do have the Division I programs that are less branded, but my concern in this aspect, if you're talking about enrollment, my concern goes more to the Division II, Division III, NAIA. You look at their budgets, some of them may be equipped to absorb this kind of financial blow. Some of them may not. And that's when you're going to take a hit over the course of, maybe a year that they may or may not be equipped to recover from.
Yes, with that, we'll transition and take a commercial break on this side. So for you all listening to KCOH 1230, thank you for joining us. Get ready for Tyrone with the Soapbox Hero as we close it out. Check us out with this commercial break for those following us on Facebook Live.
And Bob, I love it, love it. I love it, love it. I love my HBCU, and man, I hope my team that won, I hope my team that won, yeah, man. I hope my team that won, I hope my team that won, yeah. I tune into the HBCU Sports Lab and see my team won a loss. It's a loss, I'm quiet as a mouse, but it's a run, it's half. How much did it dab, yeah? Dr. Cavil, you know what he be talking about. Mike and Charles, they know what they be talking about. They compress the analytic data with your hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they want to lose, yeah, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson. And you gon' learn today, how your team they play, how they play, boys. You gon' learn today, how your team they play, how they play, yeah. We represent that SWAC, that MEAC, and let me say, what's up to Tennessee, stay. You tune into the HBCU Sports Lab with Dr. Cavil, Mike and Charles, nothing time, yeah.
Yes, this is Dr. Fields inside HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop, as we tuning off and saying so long to those listeners on KCOH 1230. Thank you for joining us. Let's get back to it for those following us on the Facebook Live side. And wanted to get some more of your thoughts in regards to. We talked a little bit earlier in regards to the branding side and what does it mean. Thinking about what Charles put out there in regards to HBCU athletics, thinking about the branding side of HBCU, some of the things that Jimmy asks us and brings up in regards to our athletic directors, and not that we want to put on those hats and play that. Those individuals get paid very well, and until they start writing checks, not that we're going to jump in and do that. But I would ask the question, in terms of what that looks like, is what does that look like for us, and some of your recommendations, marketing wise, branding wise, strategic wise. What are some of the things that you would like to see done more for our HBCUs from a leadership perspective? And this is irregardless of one institution. We're talking about 100 plus HBCUs, various of them 20 plus, if you were playing at the FCS Division I level, 30 plus playing at the HBCU level, and several of them almost 30 if you were playing at the 15 if you were playing at the NAIA level to be more accurate there. But Mike, what are some recommendations or suggestions you would like to see in terms of each of these divisions starting to push out there? And you can make it generic in regards to that, because I know consulting wise you would bring it differently if you had to from your professional hat for each of those levels. But generically, what are your thoughts in terms of what that looks like?
Number one, co-branding, more co-branding or strategic co-branding and more visibility. And by co-branding, what I mean, and just to give the simple example is, maybe you see like a Sprint phone commercial and you happen to see a Coca-Cola product on there. So they're kind of co-branding. And there was a company that had the term circle the customer, circle the globe. And the company that used this marketing and branding technique said, anywhere you go into a McDonald's, you're going to see our product. And every time a McDonald's grew anywhere in the world, you also saw their product in there. And that required the least amount of resources, and it provided exponential growth. I would like to see a lot of our programs doing that. We tend to take traditional marketing and branding techniques. I'd like to see us be a little bit more creative and look at technology, and maybe we could do some co-branding with the growth of technology. Attach our name to something that's very popular out there, so that when they grow, our exposure grows and our product gains more recognition. So that's one of the things that kind of stands out to me.
No doubt about it. Your final thoughts on that, Charles? And what would be some of your recommendations in that framing?
Yeah, I think one of those things might hit the nail on the head in terms of more flexibility with regards to thinking outside the box from a marketing standpoint. You mentioned co-branding. For me, my big thing is information, and being completely transparent with providing your fan base things such as what the budget will look like, things of that nature. I appreciate when your athletic department lays out, here's why we are doing these quote unquote money games, if you will. So for me, I look at the approach of transparency means everything to me. So if you can continuously be transparent in terms of why you're trying to ask for money or why you are seeking certain sponsors or whatever the case might be, that goes a long way for me.
No doubt about it. We're going to transition out again, and we're going to pick you all up on a different Blue Jean meeting so we can continue for our second hour. So give you about 2 minutes as we transition back out and close out of this meeting, and I'll send you a message to join me back on the Blue Jean meeting so we can continue this conversation for the second half of the show.
I love my HBCU and ball. I love it, love it. I love it, love it. I love my HBCU and man, I hope my team that won. I hope my team that won. Yeah, man. I hope my team that won. I hope my team that won. Yeah. I tune into the HBCU Sports Lab and see my team won a loss. If they lost, I'm quiet as a mouse. But if they won, just half. I'ma do the dab, yeah. That's Cavil, you know what he be talking about. Mike and Charles, they know what they be talking about. They compress the analytic data with the hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they wanna lost left, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson. And you gon' learn today, how your team they play, how they play, boy. You gon' learn today, how your team they play, how they play, yeah. The weapons in that swag, that me yak, and let me say, what's up to Tennessee, stay. Tune into the HBCU Sports Lab with Dr. Bill, Mike and Charles, knocking time, yeah.
YT Production.
So I'll bring you right back. Check your emails, guys, because we got y'all ready to go. We're closing out on this one. Check your emails.
I love my HBCU. And boy, I love it, love it. I love it, love it. I love my HBCU. And man, I hope my team that won. I hope my team that won. Yeah, man. I hope my team that won. I hope my team that won. Yeah. I tune into the HBCU Sports Lab and see my team won a loss. If they lost, I'm quiet as a mouse. But if they won, I'ma do the dab, yeah. Cavil, you know what he be talking about. Mike and Charles, they know what they be talking about. They compress the analytic data with your hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they wanna lose, yeah, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson. And you gon' learn today, how your team they play, how they play, boy. You gon' learn today, how your team they play, how they play, yeah. We represent that swag, that MEAC, and let me say, what's up to Tennessee, stay. Tune into the HBCU Sports Lab with Dr. Bill, Mike and Charles, and nothing time.
YT Production.
Yeah. I love my HBCU. And boy, I love it, love it. I love it, love it. I love my HBCU. And man, I hope my team that won. I hope my team that won. Yeah, man. I hope my team that won. I hope my team that won. Yeah. I tune into the HBCU Sports Lab and see my team won a loss. If they lost, I'm quiet as a mouse. But if they won, I'ma do the dab, yeah. Dr. Cavil, you know what he be talking about. Mike and Charles, they know what they be talking about. They compress the analytic data with your hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they wanna lose, yeah, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson. And you gon' learn today, how your team they play, how they play, boy. You gon' learn today, how your team they play, how they play, yeah. We represent that swag, that MEAC, and let me say, what's up to Tennessee, stay. Tune into the HBCU Sports Lab with Dr. Bill, Mike and Charles, and nothing time.
You know I gotta do that for you guys.
Callaway, host of the HBCU Report, and right now, you're inside the HBCU Sports Lab with my guy, all hail the dean of HBCU Sports. You know I named him that. Dr. Cavil, my guy. What's happening, man?
Oh man, just doing it well. This is Dr. Ville inside the HBCU Sports Lab, as we do it all the time. Just wanted to shout out and give you some updates. We're going to try to continue with the second half of the show. Let's see if I can get these guys back here on this side, and then we'll do what we do, give you an extra hour. Hopefully you were interested in the dialogue we were having there, so wanted to make sure that all was ready as we got it. We got Charles back. See if we can get Mike back as we're waiting on Mike to join us on his side. Charles wanted to get in here with a little more. I see you updated as you may have transitioned. Oh, I see you got the Jackson State Prairie View game on. That ain't right, man. That just ain't right. I can't share anything with y'all. So you all that can see us. And we'll see if we can get you a feed on Facebook as well. But if you're watching me on Facebook as we continue the second half on the show, let me give you a platform what I've just seen what Charles did. Charles took the moment break there, and he lined up. And you all may be aware that Jackson State came to Prairie View Thursday this year. And it was a exciting overtime game that the Jackson State Tigers. Go ahead.
Probably the most exciting game of the year in HBCU football.
Well put, no doubt about it. Especially for those Jackson State fans. Prairie fans, I'm not sure how excited they want to say it was, but it was really, in a lot of ways, as we say, a classic game in that matchup. Before we get in this dialogue, what was your most, since you put it on and you brought it on, what was your most memorable moment in that game in terms of watching it? And kudos as your mom got a chance to come down and catch that game. I thought that was excited. She got to come up to the suite and tried to make sure we have our hospitality, and hopefully she had a good time, certainly with the victory. I know she did. But what did you remember about that matchup?
Well, I just thought that might have been the coming out party for Jackson State's quarterback of the future, Jalen Jones. You saw that he was the quarterback of record in the fourth quarter, and he made a lot of plays with his legs. I think he was, kind of maturing as a quarterback, if you will, and led them into overtime in that game. And then, of course, you had the broken down play that some type way turned into a touchdown for Jackson State. But I think what sticks out for me in that game is Jalen Jones, in terms of he being the quarterback of record, I think, for Jackson State in the near future. That was pretty much his coming out game.
No doubt about it. What I remember that game is the fourth down play. Much as you said. The fourth down play where you have a fumble snap. And for Prairie fans that were out there, all of them rose to their feet. They were cheering as they're supposed to, all excited. I think most of them were honest. They would think the game was over. Jackson State fans were on their feet. They were not necessarily cheering because they thought it was over. The running back,
I certainly did.
The running back picks up the ball brilliantly to his thoughts. Noticed that he had nowhere to go. He rolling out to his left, if you're watching the film, and he catches just out the glimpses of his eye as a person is barreling down on him, the defensive end, if you will. Now I think it was a cornerback that rolled out on that side. To bear down on him, and you have a linebacker coming from the other side trying to chase him down. He sees out the corner of his eye a wide receiver that is essentially by himself, with a cornerback about 2 feet away, but enough where he certainly could get him the ball. He throws him the ball. You still think there's a chance to make the play as he's behind the first down marker. He makes a stutter step move and brilliantly gets away from the cornerback that is in that area. And not only does he get the first down play, he is able to get in the end zone, which at that time does not end the game. But with the point after ties the game and send it to the second overtime, where Jackson State is able to score a touchdown again. Score a field goal, and then force Prairie View to kick the field goal. But Prairie View misses their field goal, and Jackson State wins the game. I just remember that play, and it was like, oh, it's over, it's done. And like, no, it's not.
Right. There was still some intrigue left. So.
No doubt about it. As we get back in there and see if we can wait to get Mike back in here to conversation, but as we get a chance to enjoy the spoils of some of these matchups with SWAC games being more televised than ever, as Charles talked about it, I wanted to get back to the thought process, if you would, of this money game and this connection, this theory in terms of the financial side of what this means for HBCU athletics. What are your thoughts on the money games? Obviously, in a lot of ways, they're necessary. We just think about it with football. Your team's playing 1 or 2 money games, anywhere from playing the FBS next 5, if you would, where then you tend to get anywhere from $250 upwards to $350, maybe $400,000. But then you play the Power 5s, and obviously you can get up from $350 all the way to $700,000 if you're lucky in some ways. My voice is cracking as you're looking at me, but I'm seeing your screen in the background, and Jackson State just scored a touchdown. So you'll see me go back and forth with that in the middle of my question. Oh wow, man, it's a heartbreak. But the fact is, do you like the idea of the money games? Obviously, you know they're important. And then in basketball, you have the money games where you're talking about anywhere from 70, really upwards from 80,000 to 110,000, probably averaging about 95,000 a game, especially when you're playing the Power 5. And then in basketball, you have more teams because you have the Atlantic 10 that can offer this kind of money because they have big programs. Obviously, the Big East programs can do that. You have the American in a lot of ways that plays significant money for the basketball game. So you have more teams that you can get this $85,000 to $105,000, if you would, in terms of those matchups. Either side, what are your thoughts on these money games?
I mean, I recognize them for what they are. They're necessary evils at this day and age. I'm not exactly excited about them whatsoever, but I recognize that until your fan base is a fan base that can self-sustain in terms of season ticket purchases, in terms of sponsorships, in terms of doing everything that you can to bring in the sort of money that these money games bring in, that they are what they are. They are necessary evils.
No doubt about it. Do you think differently in terms of basketball since you have the FCS level versus playing up at the FBS level? Because there's two divisions, and in basketball they're all Division 1s, even though we still see them as Power 5 there. Do you see any difference between whether you do it in football or whether you do it in basketball?
I'm sure there's a different framework in terms of talking about basketball, but again, I don't think that programs are at a level yet where they can self-sustain without bringing in that the monies from playing these big time matchups. And like I said, until our fan bases are such that we can self-sustain via season tickets, via sponsorships, via whatever it is to bring in that $1.3 million that comes in from playing outside of our conference or outside of our HBCUs. I recognize these games as being what they are, necessary evil.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I think you make some excellent points. Tough decisions that have to be made when you talk about that. I think we have Mike that just jumped back in here, and so I'll follow up and catch you up so you get a chance to answer this question. We were just going past the part where we were talking about how we broke down the money and how this was equivalent to 3 football money games or 10 basketball money games. Obviously, we played 1 football game and 10 money games, which is closer to it. And so I asked Charles first what was his thoughts in terms of, obviously you understand that HBCU need to play these money games, but what are your thoughts on the money games in football, where if you play the next 5, you get usually $250, closer to $3, upwards to $450, but when you play the FBS games, you get $354, closer to $6. In some cases, you might be able to get some teams, depending on if your band comes, maybe $750. What are your thoughts on these games? Are they good for the brand? Obviously, they're necessary evil. But what are your overall thoughts on the money game side?
Yeah, I thought they're a necessary evil, but I think they hurt the brand, and more so I think they're a detriment to recruiting a lot of times. Over the course of years, and I think it's a cumulative effect. You play enough of these money games, and you see kind of, the deficits of these money games, and maybe you get $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 on it. But what is that doing for your overall brand and your ability to attract talent or quality product to the university? The other thing is, if you play a significant enough money game over the time, what does that do physically to your team? What does that do mentally to your team in a given year as well? I just think, and maybe there's a study out there, I just think that there's some study that says, over the long haul, maybe the immediate short-term financial gain or the necessary evil maybe justifies it. I just hadn't seen that, and I see more of a long-term detriment to a program if we continue to play a lot of these money games.
Good deal. So as we start to close off, and we'll only go to 7:30, and we'll start looking to see some feedback if people like the idea of us stretching this out and maybe doing a second hour. So we'll close out in 7:30. So final thought that I have right before we get to the final thought on this, Mike, in terms of that, is the second part of the question I asked Charles was there any difference that you see in regards to playing it on the football side when you're playing FCS to FBS versus doing on the basketball side when all of them are Division I? Do you see any difference in terms of that thought process of it?
Yeah, I guess I see. It depends on it depends a lot more on the teams. I do see more of a difference. You see more of a dichotomy on the football field. But you do see those instances where, in some cases, there's a little bit more of a competitiveness in those games. I don't know why. It just seems maybe it's because it's basketball, and maybe the FCS and maybe the schools have more of an opportunity or to compete with a lot of those upper echelon D1 teams, at least, more competitively than you see on the gridiron. I can't really put hammer to nail to it and put the exact around it, but I see kind of a difference where there's more of a black and white dichotomy on the football tip. I think there's opportunities where you could kind of maximize that. Maybe not play the Tier 1 D1, but maybe play the Tier 2 and get some, reduced monetary value out of it and still be competitive and add exposure and value to your program at the same time. Whereas I don't see those opportunities on the football team. So I see them as a little bit different.
So we'll make this the last one, and then I'll, sneak in my song again, as I was able to do it while you're away. But I need to make sure you all hear it, or y'all's.
I was hoping you forgot about that time.
No, sir. With that, with all the questions, and you want to wrap this up with what we all put on the table today for folks to think about where we're moving forward. Starting with you, Charles, what are your final thoughts in terms of what you like to see going forward for our HBCUs as they deal with the COVID-19 pandemic, framing it, whether we end up having a fall football season or not?
I'll be honest. Right now, looking at a fall football season, I think is not realistic. I think before you ask athletes to put themselves in harm's way, you would hope that there was a vaccine that is available. So that's why I think any sort of contact sport or sports in general, from the athletic part, I think it's kind of difficult. And then you talk about putting 30, 40, 50,000 fans in stadiums without a vaccine being available. I just right now I don't see it, and I don't want to project out further than what I see right now. But right now I'm just not optimistic about it.
Right, I think that's fair. Obviously, a lot of people don't want to get to that point, but that's why we bring us on and you all particular, to answer these tough questions. In a lot of ways, the commissioner of the SWAC, Dr. Charles McCullen, in his various interviews and some of the personal conversations I had with him, he's erring on the side of caution. And while he would love to see us move forward, he's talking about understanding that he will make the tough decisions, protect his family in regards to, with both of them playing college athletics. Obviously, one of them finishing up their graduate year, final year at Jackson State, but he still has a son over at Texas Southern University, and now a younger daughter and his wife, that his responsibility is to the student athletes that participate, and he treats them as he would do his family in terms of fighting with them at all costs. Finally, Mike, as Charles alluded to, what are your thoughts in terms of playing this forward? What do you see taking place in regards to even a season starting in football this fall, as Charles alluded to? What are your final thoughts on that?
I take a little bit of a different approach. I'm cautiously optimistic, to be fair. I'd like for us to have this conversation in a month. I think most organizations are really starting to hit a plateau. And who knows where we'll be 30 days from now, what we'll know that we don't know now.
That's fair.
You know, we are starting to see some signs of hope. I would like to see maybe what I would like to see is maybe a backup plan. Because even if, you know, in 30 days, 45 days, this thing starts to take a turn, it's still going to have some kind of effect on the fall. So maybe we delay it, whatever. What's the plan for that as well, and how well is that communicated? That's what I'd like to see. And then we have maybe what you call D-Day, and we say, okay, you know, the fall season's a wash. But I'm a little caught, based on what I'm seeing, you know, all across America, you're starting to see some signs of hope. I'm a little cautiously optimistic, and maybe I'm in a minority, but you are seeing a larger number of folks healed from it, and, you know, on the backside of being exposed to it. So there's some rays of hope out there from my perspective.
That's pretty good. We see that perspective, and I think that's important in what we bring to the table. The concerns, the rays of hope, and we'll see how it plays out. With that,
what up,
check this out.
It's your boy Rob Calloway, host of the HBCU Report, and right now, you're inside the HBCU Sports Lab with my guy. All hail the dean of HBCU Sports. You know I named him that. Dr. Cavil, my guy. What's happening, man?
And there we have it. As we close up, brought you an extra half hour. Hopefully, you thought it was worth your time. Let us know your thoughts, and we'll decide whether that's something we want to look at going forward. We take the opinions of our viewers very importantly, so we'll see how that goes. This is Dr. Cavil with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. As we come to a close today, let's look at hoping you enjoyed our thoughts on the discussion. I am Dr. Cavil, a.k.a. the Dean of College HBCU Sports, as recently given to me by Rob Calloway. Check out his weekly show, as he's gone twice a week on Spreaker as well. I am Dr. Cavil, the Dean of HBCU Sports with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. As we come to close, we hope you enjoyed our lecture today. Again, we thank you for listening to us. Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab radio show with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop every Tuesday right here from 6 to 7, right here on KCOH 1230 AM, live and Facebook Live as well. As we do that, follow me on Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. That's DrKenyattacavil. That's DrKenyattacavil on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Dream big and continue to move forward. We will talk to you soon.
I love my HBCU.
Lecture this.
I hope my team that won. I hope my team that won. Yeah. I hope my team that won. I hope my team that won. Yeah. I tune into the HBCU Sports Lab and see my team won a lot. If they lost, I'm quiet as a mouse. But if they won, it's half. I'ma do the dab, yeah. Dr. Cavil, you know what he be talking about. Mike and Charles, they know what they be talking about. They can press the analytic data with your hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they won a lot, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson. And you gon' learn today, how they team they play, how they play, boy. You gon' learn today, how you say they play, how they play, yeah. We represent that swag, that me, yeah. Let me say, what's up to